People explain US power with politics, or culture, or money, but the real advantage was already there. Before the first election, before the first factory, before the first aircraft carrier, it's the map. And once you see it, you can't unsee why the United States didn't just become rich. It became hard to replace. Start with the obvious: 2 oceans. For most of history, that kind of distance wasn't just a moat, it was time. Time to mobilize, time to build, time to choose when wars start and when they don't. Even now, oceans still force an attacker to solve the hardest problem first: sustained logistics. Because winning a battle is one thing, feeding the war is another. And oceans punish anyone who can't keep ships, fuel, parts, and people moving every day for months. Then there's the part most people underestimate: the interior. Not just land, not just space. A uniquely valuable interior, connected, navigable, and productive at scale. The Mississippi River system isn't just a river, it's a continent-sized conveyor belt. It links farms to factories, factories to ports, and it turns distance inside the country into an advantage instead of a weakness. Bulk goods can move in enormous volumes when water does the heavy lifting. And when the cost of moving basics stays low, food, energy inputs, raw materials, everything upstream gets easier. You can build bigger supply chains because the foundation doesn't collapse under its own weight. That's what a lot of countries never get. An economy that can breathe through its own arteries. Now stack resources on top of logistics, farmland, and energy. When a country can feed itself at scale, it doesn't just avoid famine, it gains leverage. Food stability isn't a headline when it works. It's only a headline when it breaks. And when it can power itself, it buys freedom of action. That doesn't mean the US never imports. It means it can absorb shocks that break other places because the baseline is resilient. When supply gets tight, some countries negotiate from panic. Others negotiate from inventory. This is the classic story. Map equals safety. Map equals wealth. Map equals power. So people talk about invading the United States like it's a movie plot, but wars are accounting problems. Even if you landed, you'd still have to feed it, fuel it, and reinforce it. Every single day. And the farther you push inland, the more the math turns against you. So if invasion isn't the threat, what is? Here's the pivot. Because the real contest isn't just happening at sea, it's happening in shipyards, semiconductor fabs, data centers, and in the financial plumbing most people never think about. On paper, the US still looks untouchable. It spends more on defense than anyone. Its tech firms are still among the most valuable on Earth. And the dollar is still the world's reserve currency, so the default assumption is simple. It adapted before. It'll adapt again. Others rise, but the US stays on top. But that framework hides the fragile part, because money isn't the same thing as capacity, and power isn't the same thing as performance. In a high-end conflict, the question isn't only, can you fight? It's whether you can replace losses fast enough to keep fighting. That's not a patriotic question. It's an industrial one. Production rates, repair cycles, bottlenecks, skilled labor, whether your supply chain survives stress or becomes the target. And this is where geography flips from advantage to constraint. When a rival builds close to home, near its industrial base, with short supply lines, it can translate production into power faster. It can test, iterate, field, and replace without crossing an ocean to do it. When you project power across distance, everything gets harder to sustain, harder to repair, and slower to replace. Distance buys you safety until distance becomes overhead. They don't need to beat you everywhere. They just need to make your response slow, expensive, and politically painful. Because overseas power isn't a single weapon, it's a system. Ports, fuel, parts, maintenance, crews, schedules, allies willing to host you, and voters willing to pay for it. If any one layer degrades, the whole machine loses tempo. And tempo is what turns capability into deterrence. Lose tempo, And you don't look weaker on paper, you look late in the real world. And this is where it flips. Now zoom out from ships and missiles and look at the pipes. Because modern power isn't only who has the biggest fleet, it's who controls the systems everyone else runs through. For decades, American economic leverage rested on a simple reality. The world's transactions, finance, and technology were built on rails the US influenced. Not always directly, not always perfectly, but enough that access could be granted or restricted, enough that rules could be enforced, enough that pressure could be applied without firing a shot. This doesn't mean the dollar is dead. It means the world is building options. Alternative payment rails, new settlement systems, local currency trade, redundant routes. Not because every country wants to escape the US, but because every country wants insurance. And the moment you build insurance, you reduce the value of the old protection. Here's why that matters. If you don't control the pipes the way you used to, you can't use financial leverage the same way at scale. And at scale, that leverage is one of the cleanest forms of modern power. Because it's not about tanks, it's about access. And access is the quiet currency of the modern world. Now layer technology on top. The US tried to slow competitors by restricting access to advanced chips, but large powers respond the same way. They spend enormous sums to build capacity at home, and they export their infrastructure abroad. Telecom backbones, cloud contracts, payment platforms, standards bodies. Because the goal isn't just to sell hardware. The goal is to make your stack normal. And once your standards become normal, your influence becomes invisible. Switching gets expensive. Integration gets painful. Dependencies grow quietly. And then one day, you realize you're not choosing freely anymore. You're choosing inside someone else's system. This is the part most people miss about decline. It's rarely one dramatic collapse. It's the slow loss of automatic advantage. The moment where you still look dominant, but the world stops defaulting to you. And there's one more layer that corrodes power from the inside: legitimacy. The US didn't just dominate with weapons and money, it dominated with an idea. For decades, millions of people didn't just fear it, they wanted to copy it. Universities, brands, culture, the sense that the future was being invented there. But soft power isn't a slogan. It's a feeling that spreads or doesn't. And when the image becomes constant dysfunction, when the system looks like it can't take care of its own people without a fight, soft power weakens. Not everywhere, not all at once, but enough that allies drift, partners hedge, rivals test limits, because they start planning for a world where the center of gravity moves. So the risk isn't that the map stops working. The oceans still exist, the rivers still flow, the interior is still productive. The risk is that the world changes around those advantages, and Washington keeps playing the old game anyway. Geography doesn't guarantee good decisions, but it gives you options, room to survive mistakes longer than you should. And that's the twist. The same map that makes the country hard to attack can also make it too confident. When protection feels permanent, strategy gets lazy. And when advantage feels infinite, leaders start spending it like it can't run out. So the hardest question isn't whether the United States has advantages. It's whether it can rebuild capacity, protect the pipes, and adapt strategy to a world where power moves faster. Through production, technology, and standards, not just through fleets and flags. And that's why this gets dangerous. Not because the US suddenly becomes weak, but because it can be strong enough to believe it doesn't have to change. And in a game where the rules are shifting, complacency is what gets priced in last. The map was the advantage.